The University of Texas at Austin, rich with a strong sense of academia, spiced by the various cultures of our world, and flavored by the spirit of Austin, has always been home to the big, the bright, and the brilliant. It has served as the realization of the melting pot our nation is often regarded as, and is, if nothing else, a place very much characterized by its eclecticism and eccentricity. It is a politically charged arena and home to our Texas state capitol. It, like every other urban sphere, is a complex blend of social, political, and moral elements of its citizenry that work to create a unique experience both within the city and throughout the university. What happens, however, when this mixture is disrupted? What happens when this melting pot is set to boil? It's at this moment that this vessel releases what we recognize as social and political discontent. The steam of poor social, institutional, political, and economic climate birth situations that are often outside of our civility. That is, we become civilly unrest. Civil unrest, as we will be exploring it, can be defined as a troubled, rebellious state of discontent that is typically politically, socially, or economically motivated, and often initiated by those most susceptible to discrimination, prejudice, intolerance, and oppression. UT has seen its share of civil unrest, and in these situations, students have been both the water and the flame in these socially heightened urban infernos. So how has student activism been experienced here at UT over the years? I'm glad you asked. The beginnings. Black students began their activism in the 1960s, confronting the UT Regents on issues of segregation here on campus. On March 11, 1960, a group of students held the first civil rights protest conducted by students at UT. They demonstrated on the fringe of campus, calling for university integration. With modest beginnings of less than 50 students picketing Regents meetings, this signaled the beginning of the UT student movement for civil rights. Mind you, black enrollment at UT was very low at this time, and the character of protest was very different at this predominantly white university than it was in other areas in the South where protest activity was led by black students at black colleges. One thing that was very real and uniformly experienced, however, was the reality of racial hatred during the time. This set the tone for an adverse social climate here on campus for African American students, and especially for students active in the civil rights movement. Activism included picketing on the drag, a student commonplace here on campus, and written addresses to the university president and board of regents. By the mid-60s, student activists had begun to spur the support of faculty. In these victories, UT, partnered with students from predominantly black campus Houston-Tillerson, succeeded in desegregating 2 off-campus theaters, managing a shift in faculty sentiment, and achieving the eventual desegregation of university-owned dormitories. The publicity-grabbing protest tactics of black and white students at UT, the building momentum of the civil rights movement nationally, and the threat of federal intervention at UT all helped these early student movements. So in summation, it seems that what brought these student activists victory is physical mobilization, peaceful protest, and bad publicity. A student here during this time, Gary Bledsoe, president of the Texas State Conference of NAACP, graduated with both a bachelor's in government, received with honors in 1973, and as a graduate of the UT Law School in 1976, where he was his graduating class president. He recalls his experience as being characterized by the racial undertones that permeated campus atmosphere.
Well, the anti-war movement was winding down when I got there, but I did participate in student activism. The social climate was not overtly hostile in terms of race, though there was much that existed on campus, including professors who taught white supremacy, very few black professors, very few black students, and professors who failed black students or gave them lower grades because of their race. And there were only 250 to 350 black students each year. But probably the best example was the dorm inquiries that occurred in the 1970s if white students would object to the black roommates. Tom Russell, who helped expose the problem with Simpkins dorm, and the Ku Klux Klan member who formerly taught at the law school, taught a class that indicated after the Board of Regents decided that Brown too applied to undergrads, the admissions department and others conspired in a sophisticated color coding system to prevent black males from being in the classroom with white females. We marched in protest of admission standards and in protest of the low number of black students.
Contemporary student movements. Student activism now is a direct result of student activism then. Much of what we're afforded here on this campus can be directly attributed to student activists of the yesteryear.
I attended UT.
So what exactly comes of student activists now? What do their victories bring?
For example, when I was on campus, for example, when I was on campus, the MLK statue had been egged several times, and basically to the egging of the statue felt was inadequate. Students basically felt the administration's response to the egging of the statue was inadequate. Basically, footage, what happened was the statue camera was egged and the MLK statue. We asked to see the footage because there is a camera on the MLK statue. Well, that was the beginning of several incidents that occurred afterward. There was blackface party. Well, that was the beginning of several incidents that occurred afterward. There was blackface parties. There was a racial profiling incident with UTPD, and all of these things were happening back to back after each other. And so, what I did, along with other student activists at the time, was we got together, we organized marches. What our main message was, just one of, because these many strategies occurring, they were to use to improve campus climate. The majority of things that we did were more clandestine, under the table, meeting with the administration, and having frank conversations with them. Particularly at the time, it was President Faulkner.
My name is Abel Mulugeta, and I came to the University of Texas in August of 2007, and I graduate this Friday, 2011. Yeah. I think it's gone up and down since I've been a freshman. Okay. I remember, early on, whenever I got here, there was some tension, some race tension involving. Something that I remember is the Malcolm X Lounge, which is a lounge in Jester, and there was an article written in the Daily Texan, talking about changing the name of the X Lounge. I think it was called Xing Out Racism, I believe. And a lot of the African American community were, we took offense to the article just because we don't feel like it was very accurate. So there was tension then. And then after that, it was a little better. There wasn't as many issues that were explicit that people could point to, but now, over the past couple months, we've noticed that there have been an array of issues that have popped up. The Roundup issue, there was an issue with in Jester with an individual wearing blackface and walking into the X Lounge. So there are various things that have happened in the past couple months that have caused people to feel maybe uncomfortable on campus. So I think the racial climate on campus climate, so the strategy that we employed, we're just making sure that we have a very healthy, had a dialogue. We were somewhat diplomatic and made sure we didn't just jump to action, and we wanted to really have a conversation and see, gather the facts. You don't want to be misleading in what you say and what you do. So we wanted to talk to the right people, and we hopefully, the couple weeks leading up to the town hall meeting, we were able to do so. So whenever the town hall meeting came up, whenever it did happen, we had an agenda, we had accurate facts, and we had the right people in the room.
So black students on this campus have a very contentious history, and it has not yet been resolved. It's getting better, but I think that UT has a very long way to go.
Activism during these time periods took many different forms, but commonalities were all too present. In this history is a definite and undeniable pattern. These uncanny similarities and parallels between these instances of unrest and student activism brought me to a realization. If the social climate was dense then with racial tension and outright racism, and yet we are still experiencing problems within our greater university community now, then these same social ailments must still exist today. The student activism we've explored has indeed affected change on our campus, but it hasn't cured our campus climate issues. Ultimately, with the survival of these issues comes greater questions of our societal fortitude. Despite differences in ideological perspectives, shifts in national, political, and economic climate, and our milestone of electing an African American president, conditions still exist today that can, and apparently are, yielding civil unrest and student protest. So what does this mean? We as a greater campus community must come together to educate ourselves and eliminate the negative undertones that pollute our great campus.